Are home appraisals racist? Good afternoon. So, I don't know. You guys probably look at Twitter all the time like I do. And I saw this tweet from Inman, which is a Realty news source, talking about a couple that feels like they were treated unfairly in a racist manner during an appraisal, and I thought that was kind of fascinating. I thought that'd be something to talk about today. And this follows on the heels of a HUD statement that I read maybe a couple days back, and so is it an epidemic? I don't know, but it seems to be getting traction. It seems to be newsworthy. Let's just get started right now. So here's the HUD statement. This is what I originally saw. It said this was their year in review, and it said HUD launched a whole of government effort to ensure all Americans are treated fairly in the home appraisals process. On June 1st, President Biden tasked Secretary Fudge with leading a first-of-its-kind intra-agency initiative to address inequity in home appraisals. In partnership with the Domestic Policy Council, HUD created the Property Appraisal and Valuation Equity Task Force, bringing together 15 federal agencies to identify and utilize all levers at their disposal to root out discrimination in the appraisal and home buying process. The task force has been exploring the extent, causes, and impacts of misvaluation faced by communities of color, gathering input from industry, advocates, and other stakeholders, and developing new policy approaches around guidance and enforcement. This work will be presented to the President and the public early next year, documenting the scope of the problem and providing a detailed, actionable agency commitments and recommendations for the next steps. I thought that was interesting. So they're going to root out discrimination in the appraisal and home buying process. Okay. So then this is the article that I saw earlier. Well, there's an Inman version, and then there's like 30 other versions, but it says, I just wanted to go over it. It says, California couple sues appraiser over what they say was racial bias in a home valuation lowballed by $500,000. So it says San Francisco Bay homeowners have filed a fair housing lawsuit in a federal district court against this lady in her appraisal firm, whose valuation of their home was almost $500,000 less than its true value. Now, I don't know if that's the right wording, because we really won't know the true value unless the house is sold in the open market. And even then that gets iffy because the appraisal comes into play. So we'll go over that later. But it says, we did our homework. We believe the white lady wanted to devalue our property because we are in a black neighborhood and the home belonged to a black family. In 2006, the couple purchased their home for $550,000, and then over the next few years, invested $400,000 in renovations that included an in-law unit and an outdoor deck. 4 years later, the couple was eager to know the new value of their home and hired an appraisal. So that's the story. Then it says the appraiser, whom the couple described to the local station as an older white woman, was impressed with the addition of windows that overlooked the San Francisco Bay. She also complimented the other improvements. And then came a shocker. The appraisal value was set at $995,000, almost $500,000 less than an appraisal done earlier in the year. The couple was stunned after learning about the appraisal discrimination. They decided to get another appraisal done, but this time the couple asked Joe, a white friend, to pose as the owner of the property. And once again, when the appraisal was determined, the couple was shocked. The house was now worth $1.4 million. The Austins are not alone, it says. There are several cases alleging racial discrimination in the home appraisal process throughout the United States. However, it is prevalent in California as homeowners are looking to cash in on greater home value as the cost of homes is on the rise. Cases of racial bias in the appraisal process have been found in Oakland, Stockton, as well as other cities in California with large black populations. So, it's later in the article, it says, however, experts in the appraisal industry acknowledge that the process is subjective. Racial bias is not always the culprit. Instead, they need to increase home values in a housing market with rising prices places appraisers in a precarious position if property owners do not agree with their analysis. Interesting. So this is a case that's being alleged, and it will be adjudicated. Next one says, this was a while back. It says, HUD reaches agreement with J.P. Morgan Chase resolving claims of race discrimination in appraisals. So does that mean that the banks who really, really do kind of charge the appraisals. I mean, they do run the appraisal show. Are the banks complicit in this discrimination? Alleged? Says the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development announced today that it has approved a conciliation agreement between J.P. Morgan Chase and a black homeowner, resolving the woman's claim that the mortgage lender, relying on an appraisal that she believed was inaccurate, valued her home at an amount lower than its actual worth because of her race. It says the race of a homeowner and the racial composition of their neighborhood must not influence the valuation of a home. I agree with that. I have no problem with that. Under the conciliation agreement, J.P. Morgan Chase will pay $50,000 to the woman and provide home lending advisors and client care specialists with mandatory training on the reconsideration of value process and the fair lending issues related to appraisals, including specifics regarding how to handle complaints of discrimination in the appraisal process. It says we did extensive research into the matter and take these complaints very seriously. Appraisers are independent contractors who are not employed by the bank. Yeah. And and that's kind of where I'm at. What if an appraiser consistently comes up with higher than market appraisals? Is the bank who hires them as an independent contractor through a third-party service going to keep using that appraiser? I'm just asking. I don't know the answer. There are specialists in the specific regions and use market-based comparisons to come up with a value. Our internal review of the appraisal assessment as well as market analysis found no substantive issues and supported the appraisal's value. So in this case, they feel like there was no issue. So why are they agreeing to the, is it easier to just to agree than it is to fight it? It says discriminatory practices are particularly problematic for black homebuyers, accounting for missed opportunities to build wealth and stability. Several studies and investigations show that many tax assessors still routinely saddle black and minority residents with property tax bills that are too high given the market value of their homes. That is an issue, okay? So if all of a sudden things appraise for more, now you're going to pay more taxes. But what they're saying is that the county that these people are in, like, they get taxed more on lower valuations. It's not good. Not good. So you got the banks involved. You got county workers involved. A lot of racism going on here. And it says here in Indianapolis, this was a while before, Indianapolis homeowner files discrimination complaint after removal of black identifiers leads to a $100,000 appraisal increase. Yeah. A housing discrimination complaint filed by a black Indianapolis homeowner alleges that after she removed items from her home that identified her race and asked a white male friend to sit in on the appraisal, the value of her home jumped more than $100,000. Last year, the woman decided to jump on the hot housing market and refinance her home in a historically black neighborhood just outside downtown Indianapolis. She planned to use her equity to purchase her grandparents' home nearby. After 2 home appraisals came back close to the price she paid for the home in 2017, she thought something was wrong. When I challenged it, it came back that the appraiser said they're not changing it. And then after she saw an article, she decided to try her own test. It says, I decided to do exactly what was done in the article. I took down every photo of my family from my house. I took every piece of ethnic artwork out. So any African artwork, I took it out. I displayed my degrees. I removed certain books. Duffy asked a white male friend to sit on the home appraisal and did not declare her race in her application or communications with the appraisal company. The new appraisal came back at more than double the first 2, valuing her home more than $100,000 higher. Says, I get choked up even thinking about it because I was so excited and happy, and then I was so angry that I had to go through all that just to be treated fairly. In the 2 complaints, they asked the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development to investigate the difference in the appraisals. In the first 2 appraisals, Nelson said that comparable sales or comps were pulled from black neighborhoods more than a mile from Duffy's home rather than those nearby that were closer to the specifics of her house. Whether or not those comps were fairly selected is something that is the basis of the complaints that we have filed. I'm doing this for my daughter, I'm doing this for my granddaughter so that when they come against obstacles, they will know that you can stand up and you can say this is not right. We think this is happening a lot more than being reported, and we want to get the word out to know that we are here as a resource for individuals if this may be happening to them. So you've got instances of racism, at least stories or allegations of that. So let me get into my thinking. Feel free to comment down below. As a real estate agent and somebody who has taken appraisal courses in grad school, there's a lot of gray area in appraising. There's three main approaches to appraisals. There's the income approach, there's the as-built approach, and there's the comparative sales approach. Appraisals for homes in the United States really only get done under the comparative sales approach, which is basically look at the houses similar and determine a value based on the difference. So you're not going to get an income approach appraisal on a single family home. The bank is not going to accept that. So this is very different than what a real estate agent would do. We still use a comparative sales approach. We would then use a marketing strategy designed to get the most money of the sale. So in a hot market, limited inventory, we see a comp in a neighborhood and it has great characteristics in that it sold fast. It's a similar home to the one we listed. We may price the house a little under the selling price of the first one and hope that multiple bidders take that house much further than what it will appraise for. In this case, the appraiser will come back and say, I have no comps to justify your sales price. And so what that means is what happened to me earlier this summer is I had a house that sold for $30,000 over asking, and there were multiple offers at that level. The appraiser could not justify the asking price, even though it was clearly an arm's length transaction. There's no racism is being alleged in that case. All that happens is that there's no comps to justify the sales price. But I had 3 offers at that price. There were not people that I knew, and I didn't telegraph the price to anyone. So that is the most pure appraisal, is actually free market, open market, someone buying the house. That's the only time you know the exact value of that home. It only happens in that moment. 1 month before, 1 month later, totally different values. And what I wanted to say is understand that bad appraisals happen all the time, both to the good and to the bad. The issue of racism in appraisals does matter, though, and here's how. These are the reasons why I think it really does matter. Number one, a homeowner refinance or an equity out. In this situation, if the owner can't refinance or get equity out because of a racist appraisal, that is an issue. The sale of the property. This is a little more tricky. If a house doesn't appraise, the buyer may not be able to afford the difference between the appraisal and the purchase price and might have to walk. In this case, the appraisal was the sole cause of the house to not be sold to that buyer. Okay, so if appraisals are coming in low, and the buyers are using a loan and they don't have extra cash to change between the appraisal, it could be a real problem. Systematic low appraisals in a particular area would definitely hurt a community. And I saw that in my time in Detroit. We fixed up a bunch of houses in Detroit. Appraisals would come back totally low. I don't know if it was because they were in a black neighborhood or what. I just know that the appraisals were ridiculous. Similar to refinancing and cash out, people need to make improvements, or people tend to make improvements to their property when they think it will pay off. As an example, when the value of my home, the value of my home when I purchased it was about $200,000, and I had no hesitation remodeling my bathroom when I knew that I could get $240,000 or $250,000 after the sale. Years later, consistently low appraisals kill the ability to improve a home or a neighborhood because the owner knows that they're in a negative equity situation already. So, I mean, if you buy a house for $200,000 and you think that it's not worth more than $160,000 or it's appraised for that, why are you putting any money into it? And that's a real issue. That will hurt communities very, very, very much. And if there is this racism in appraisals, that's going to be an issue. I just want you to understand that appraisals are just a justification for the bank to lend money, and that's it. It's also just a moment in time. It's about the same relevance as getting approved for a 30-year mortgage. I don't know what I'll be doing a year from now. How can I be a good credit risk for 30 years into the future? It's totally subjective. And even we use these things. We use credit histories and credit reports to justify putting out to lend to people, but we only do that because there's nothing else better. I'm particularly interested in this practice of black families removing articles from their homes, a whitewash, to try and get a better appraisal. Can you imagine having to do such a thing or thinking you would need to do such a thing? When I show homes throughout St. Louis, I don't pay too much attention to who's on the wall. It's not particularly relevant to my buyers because the sellers will be leaving anyway. I've never had somebody say, "Are we in a black neighborhood?" I've never said, I've never had anybody say, "This is a black home." That doesn't ever happen, but maybe it happens to others. On racism with respect to appraisals, those appraisal reports are written. You actually pay for them on a refinance. So it shouldn't be too difficult to check the comparable sales and see if a mistake was made. Also, you have to be careful with market conditions. The one article talks about homes in California that are in the $500,000 range on a bad day and can be worth more than $1 million on a good day. If there are very few comps and the market moves fast, it's possible to be off by that much. And, I was only dealing with a $200,000 home here. Property values in California, even in terrible neighborhoods, are worth much more than anything we have in St. Louis, really, at the same square footage. So, that is something to take a look at. And then finally, I think most people in the general public have no idea how the appraisal process works. So whenever something is unknown, there's this sense that someone is hiding something. My thought is that it isn't whether or not appraisals are racist, but appraisals are quite ridiculous in the first place. It's definitely more of an art than a science, and since it can be manipulated by human interaction, you will get many different outcomes, some of which are bound to show racism, sexism, many isms, and economic class disparities as well. What happens when there's a neighborhood that's considered a poor part of town, that's a white part of town? Will they also get the same poor appraisal process as someone else? I think so. What do you think? Do you think that appraisals are systematically racist? I mean, there's been allegations. The government has sicked HUD on finding out the root causes of it. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening, and I'll catch you on the next one.